Next, there's the big drama.
Yes.
And I found this one to be fascinating because...
This is...
Is the core of this just that... Because I'm not Mythic Pluser. I remember somebody, like, they armoried me and were like, oh my god, you've only done a +6. I was like, yeah. I only did a +6 because I don't do Mythic Plus. I was raiding instead. That's the thing I'd rather do. Which is kind of funny because now I was all fired up about us getting glory of the Nathria Raider, and suddenly we couldn't actually fill our roster, and the guild is playing FF instead. So I really hope we do get glory of the Nathria Raider done, you know. But anyway, right, Mythic Plus, the Tyrannical affix, this whole situation, and the seasonal reward, really, like. I'm not happy with a recolor, but a recolor that's just a tiny tint shift in terms of how it feels doesn't feel good.
It's also, it's weird. It's like, I feel like a recolor is a little bit, especially one that's so close, it just feels so disrespectful to people who have the first achievement. It brings you this whole thing of why bother? Like, will the Keystone Master for 9.2 be a different tint? So this isn't special to me. Yeah. It's not precedent's been set.
Like, don't care about it,
Yeah.
So I think overall the first thing we've got to engage with is the Wowhead article, specifically the headline of the Wowhead article, because, you know, it was not written in a super inflammatory way. You know, it doesn't look like a title in YouTube or something.
No.
But for a written article title, it certainly went in a specific direction. Yeah. It did a very, very specific comparison to the past, got its title via that specific comparison, and while the actual content of the article is complete and robust, the title doesn't perfectly reflect the nuance of the situation. Now, we could be charitable and say that Wowhead... that was the title of their article. Their expectation is people read their article. But of course, it gets humongously shared on the social media like Twitter and stuff. The amount of comments, even on wowhead.com for this post was humongous. The amount of tweets and stuff, the discourse, all quite humongous. So the initial headline was, Season 2 Keystone Master requires +15 on both Tyrannical and Fortified in patch 9.1. Which, technically speaking, it does. If you were only doing +15 and you were really trying to make it, if you were trying to force the situation to be apples to apples, that's 100% correct.
Yeah.
But it's actually, there's a lot more nuance. It's a lot more blended than that. And really, I feel like most of the problem here is not even the immediate problem that people have identified. I think it is the Tyrannical affix.
Yeah.
From everything I've read.
Yeah, there's like a weird, like you can very clearly see the steps that happen in people's heads for the anger to come around. Because obviously, I mean, we could talk for ages about how like this is indicative of how the entire modern ecosystem of news works, where they had to condense it into smaller words and it lost all the meaning. But it's more the idea that, you have to do it on both Tyrannical and Fortified, which sort of, it still requires more. But fundamentally, it's people going, what? Why do I have to do twice as many dungeons?
Yes.
And on Tyrannical?
And
fuck that. Like,
while not literally twice as many dungeons, actually sort of twice as many dungeons. Like, KSM will just take longer to attain in this patch versus the past. Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, like, there is a part of the spirit of their title that is absolutely true. Yeah. It will take longer.
Yeah. It's just I guess it's the people read that as like how do I put it? Like an absolute, like that's the achievement text.
Yeah.
But the achievement text is just 2,000 rating.
Yes.
But then you kind of, in order to get your rating high, you do have to do Tyrannicals and Fortifieds because they're treated as separate dungeons.
There's no point in actually going into the maths here. Basically, what people need to know is if you wanted to get Keystone Master while avoiding Tyrannical, you would need to complete every dungeon at Fortified on a level 24 Keystone.
Yep, which is
a lot more work.
A little bit more difficult than 15. Just a little bit.
So basically, in the past, if you were at around that Mythic +15 level of skill, and that's kind of where you topped it out, you would just do every single dungeon once at that level. You get Keystone Master, happy days. Whereas now, if you did the exact same amount of work, you would not have enough rating to get Keystone Master, because the new rating system takes into account you doing a run on both a fortified and tyrannical of a dungeon, because that's basically just version of dungeon where boss is big, version of dungeon where mob's big. That's that.
It's not different content, like?
It's not different content. It's almost as if it's being treated as different content in the scoring of this system.
Yep.
I mean, I get the system, like, reflecting that Tyrannical and Fortified are, like, different dungeoning experiences of the same place. But so I can see that logically. But I think player experience is the important thing, and that's where we've got to talk about the Tyrannical affix, because it seems to be broadly kind of hated. Yeah. And in fairness, I have heard people say they don't like Tyrannical for years. Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny because personally the idea of like the boss fight mattering is cool to me, but I mean, I guess it just doesn't really work out that well in practice.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some things like, it places so much in a boss fight that where like, if you are saving Lust for a boss fight, because Lust will proportionately speaking be less of a percentage of the overall duration of that boss fight. It's like, if you wipe, your run's screwed.
Yeah, it's a case where I think
like more so. It's more punishing than a fortified.
Yeah, because fortified is a case where you can like piecemeal kill stuff, or you can if the pack of 5 mobs is too big for you, and will kill you, you're going to deplete definitely, if you just keep running your head into it. But you can kill 1 mob at a time and it stays dead, or you can someone can res mid pull and run back. I mean, that'd be a bit tough, but you could do it if the tank could survive. But like the DPS is a problem. But for bosses, it is actually like it is a wall, where it's just, if you can't do this, no, you can't finish the dungeon.
Yeah, and then very often when people are pushing keys, the only way they can actually do it is with Lust.
And now with Prideful for this season, Lust and Prideful, which is an extreme amount of extra damage. But with Lust, you've got to wait that 10 minutes. And for Prideful, you've got 1 shot. And
that basically brings me into that thing where, and I can't really speak to this experientially. I can speak to it though, just through the lens of thinking about game design.
Yeah.
Of course, I've had a similar thought when it comes to, we talked about this before the stream, how in the Total War games, in terms of the battle difficulty setting, what you as a player would ideally hope for is that, like, my unit of Principes, so if we're just going to go for the Roman roster, that my Principes should basically be as powerful as my enemy's Principes.
Yeah.
And the difference would be that on a harder battle difficulty, I'd be facing down tougher, more aggressive, better thinking AI. Now, what they've ended up doing in that series is, because they can't get the AI to be good enough for that to be the difficulty, they've just had to do flat stat buffs to the enemy's units. But then that has the problem where in a game like, say, 3 Kingdoms, you have a situation where, you're supposed to have a rock, paper, scissors between swords, spears, and cav. But the hidden unit bonuses, by just cranking the numbers up to get your difficulty via that basically gives you a problem where your swordsman, like good swordsman, can be defeated by trash spam spearmen. And then you're in a situation where the intended design parameters of the game, basically the wheels fall off the carriage.
Yeah.
And I think what people have said to me with Tyrannical is, because of the way that it buffs up the boss damage, it kind of gets to the stage where you basically feel like you can only get through bosses by cheesing them and stuff like that, which, that's a design space that I don't really like being in. I would rather that, like if your equivalent of Tyrannical week was just every boss has, not that this would be feasible at all, but if it was like every boss has a new mechanic in the same way that a Mythic raid does. I mean, I know a Mythic dungeon does have an extra mechanic generally, but that extra mechanic is needed because, Heroic is utterly brain dead. Mythic is an actual fight. I totally think there would be room for an extra mechanic for many boss fights.
Absolutely.
I think like that would be a lot more fun than just numbers up 30%. Which, there's, I can never pronounce his name. It starts with Sai. He's one of the casters for the MDI, and he was just sort of tweeting me some information about his issues with Tyrannical, and that was all quite illuminating because it's obviously stuff I've not experienced as a player.
It's really difficult because I guess the point is instead of adding more mechanics, they just tune up mechanics until they kill you. Like, I think the experience that people, like most people in your Twitter replies was talking about was tanks being one shot.
Yeah.
Where if a tank can't survive a mechanic, then you've got cooldowns to survive it. Like, and I'm talking you, like, it might get so bad you have to pop bubble to survive something as a prop paladin. And then if the boss isn't dead before the next unavoidable mechanic, that's it. Like, that's you cannot do this. Which is where the lust and prideful problem comes in, where you've got one shot, you've got like one silver bullet in your back pocket, but if you miss, then it's over.
Yeah.
And that feels horrendous, but it's because it's not like, here's more avoidable mechanics, or here's avoidable mechanics that will punish you harder. It is just, the problem comes when it's like, nah, this explosion will kill you if you let it happen. And I think Hakar, people talk about that being the worst, where it's like the entire fight mechanics is a soft and rage, but when his HP goes up so much that you can't avoid the soft and rage, then you're like, well,
really?
Yeah, you've just, yeah.
So it's basically a situation where Blizzard break their own designs with, it's like some bosses, like that the scaling of Tyrannical just does not work while keeping the bosses with their intended flow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That seems like a natural issue that arises when you try to get scaling difficulty via the way that they do it in Mythic Plus dungeons, and it's totally something that would never happen in raids because of how raid difficulty goes up.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why people don't like Tyrannical.
Yeah, that is basically the most of it, where it's just, it at a high enough point it becomes like degenerate, it breaks. At like kind of lower levels, I actually really enjoy it myself. Because,
Tyrannical?
Yeah.
Same, actually.
Because I don't think of it, like, when you're doing Mythic Plus on Fortified, you're like, this boss is going to fall over. Because we've got so much damage that, destroying these Fortified mobs is what takes time, and they have good massive health pools. So the boss just falls over flat. I mean, they do get buffed from the actual, the natural modifier of the Keystone, but it feels like that's just it's just not accounted for at that level.
Gotcha. So
and they can't do that they can't change it without fixing the fight.
So this kind of weird thing with affixes where, okay, here's my personal opinion. You could basically delete every single affix bar the seasonal, maybe crank up a little bit of the per keystone scaling, even that does get into issues though, but you could do that, and I would vastly prefer it because, I remember dealing with Volcanic when I was in the Arcway. I'm quite bored. Just the idea of having to engage with that again is like not interesting to me. And then it's, as you said, it's like, what was it? Why are there volcanoes in Necrotic Wake? Or something?
Yeah.
So for me, it's that thing where I actually don't, the more that I think about it, and as time has went on beyond Legion, because in Legion they were a bit new and novel, I think the affixes are basically bad. I think they're bad for the game. I think they homogenize dungeons. They make dungeons feel the same. And generally speaking, kiss curse ones, like the Visions of N'Zoth seasonal affix, the current seasonal affix, probably the next one. Like, those are kind of cool because of the gameplay that comes from them. But I think when an affix just comes down to, a new way for you to get fucked, or something like that, I think it feels less good. And it's like, I know that is an aspect of difficulty and you need to increase your difficulty. I totally agree with that. But in my head, it's just like, I would rather just have more mechanics be designed for the dungeons. And I honestly don't think that's too big an ask, because Blizzard they're big boys. They're a big company. They can do that.
Yep. I mean,
surely they can do that.
Yeah, like I have here in the doc, it's like, what's wrong with affixes in general? They're uniquely punishing and not rewarding to deal with. It's like, obviously, because my brain just runs on analogies these days, I was thinking, like, it's imagine you're playing a game of football, soccer, playing a game of kickball, and then, you've got your opponents, and you're playing against your opponents. This is all great. You're running about, you're kicking the ball, and other things you do, and that, tackling people. But then, instead of the team, like, the enemy team getting more difficult, what they've done is they've done things like only one half of the net counts as a goal, or they've now dug a big pile of holes in the pitch that you can stand in if you're not watching your feet. And it's like, that's not making it any harder. That's just making it more annoying in a sense. I mean, it is making it harder. It is giving you more things to worry about. That's true, but it's not in the satisfying way that the actual design really is. And I think that's kind of it.
So the one I just bolded and highlighted in our doc,
Yeah.
they feel like Blizzard tampering with your gameplay instead of the dungeon just being hard. That's kind of what gets me. It's why I don't really... I'm not a big fan of like these just sort of blanket systems. Mm-hmm. You know, in my head, it's like a dungeon should be harder because of things that make sense for the dungeon. But then again, like you cannot have mega dungeon-like hard modes in a world where all of dungeons are a time trial. And I think that's a fundamental problem here. Yep. Whenever Legion did Mythic Plus dungeons and that cat was let out of the bag, it fundamentally changed what a dungeon is in a way where I really don't know if Blizzard are going to be able to change it or move in a different direction. Yeah. So I think we're kind of stuck with current Mythic Plus for a long time.
Yep.
And I would be, it's like in my head, because we talked about this earlier, like my sort of ideal solution, not ideal, but perhaps this is something that could work. It would be remove all affixes.
Yep.
Have a seasonal affix, and then a different keystone levels. You have like, say, 3 permutations of the seasonal affix with increasing difficulty, perhaps increasing kiss curse risk reward, and do it that way. Yeah. Because that means that you get a unique thematic design every single, every single patch. You don't have those annoying homogenizing elements that probably make it more annoying to design dungeons than anything. And I think that players don't seem to appreciate that much because I don't think people appreciate the affixes that much. So, if we could just double down on the idea of a seasonal affix and then maybe work out, you have Prideful rank 1, Prideful rank 2, Prideful rank 3, and those are active at keystone levels, 5, 10, 15.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like? For the new one, it seems to be that you defeat the jailer's forces at certain points in the dungeon, you get an anima power. Well, all right, at Mythic Plus 5, maybe those could be weak jailer forces and, just a small little buff. But then at plus 10, stronger jailer forces. And the full, a set of anima buffs you could get that are, more powered up. And then maybe the plus 15 could be harder again or something like that. Whereas at least that would let them do the cool things for each season, but it would basically remove the issues that people seem to have, where people don't really seem to appreciate most of the affixes. Now, this is not really massively from my own experience. This is just from hearing what people say. Yeah. And I guess trying to think about it in a first principles way.
Yeah, because it puts a lot of... Because I did a lot of M Plus in Legion, because I played the shit out of Legion. Like, unreasonable amounts of it. And then I did a decent bit or a little bit at the start of BFA, and I kind of didn't really care about it because it was all the same shit. I just kind of felt like it was all... Once I had done the dungeons, it didn't matter to me anymore, because I know what to interrupt. I know how to dodge a boss mechanic. And they aren't fun enough for me to come back to the dungeon again. And the Mythic Plus doesn't add enough for me to actually think, oh, well, this is going to feel like new engaging content. It's like an ability that I can dodge that kills me if I don't... It doesn't matter if I can dodge it. It doesn't matter if it does 1 damage or all of my health or wipes us or deletes my account. If I can dodge it, I can dodge it. And that's kind of the problem. Where mechanics don't become more difficult, they just become more punishing. And then that means if they design in a way where mechanics are really, really difficult all the time, which they haven't done because they have to have the plus 0 mythic level, then there's just no way for them to make... There's no way in the Mythic Plus system to design this blanket that you put over it that makes it better.
Yeah.
It's just, once I've learned it, I've learned it.
It's going to be interesting, because by getting more first-hand experience of this... Because my plan is to get Keystone Master in 9.1.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I want to do in my character, and I think that just means I'm going to be a bit more fully exposed to all of these things.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's going to be like. Yeah. I don't even think it's going to be that hard, because I've not looked at any of these dungeons, thought, that's hard content. It's like, I'm used to doing raid bosses, all that shit looks pretty easy to me.
Yeah, I think...
to be honest.
Well, that's exactly my problem, where I don't think Mythic Pluses at reasonable high levels are any more engaging than Mythic Zeros are at the start of an expansion, because affixes are just a pain in your ass. So they're not more fun to deal with. It's just, you have to dodge this, but you also have to dodge it at the same time. And it doesn't feel like a mechanic either.
That's a great point. I had a great experience in Mythic Zeros.
Yeah.
Way under geared at the start of this expansion. And I don't know what that is the equivalent to in terms of a current Mythic Plus or whatever. But all I know is whenever I'm just engaging with that dungeon, we're all under geared, so we actually have to pay attention to all the mechanics. Then it's really cool and fun. Yeah. So I'm interested in seeing, does it actually feel like that by the time you're doing a 15, which I haven't, but. Yeah. Hopefully, there'll be enough people in our guild still playing World of Warcraft that this is an adventure that can be embarked upon. In addition to getting Curve on Curve and Sylvanas. And hopefully we'll get Curve a bit quicker. I feel like we're more put together as a raid team versus our rocky days at the start.
Definitely. Also, actually, Aaron in chat here says, it's harder to get into Mythic group than actually doing the dungeon. And I think that's one of my problems. That's big time. Because there's not enough people in the guild on at the time I'm usually on. To just go, all right, let's hop into a plus 15 here or anything like that. It's just, I have to go pug a group and then I have to struggle with the fact that pugs aren't always reliable. I haven't done very many, so my score is low. Not a problem that will go away with a Mythic Plus score versus Raider.io. Yeah. It will just change in flavor. It'll still be the same problem, but that's kind of the problem. That's the kind of problem of pugging versus grouping. But that's actually the point. Like I have spent longer trying to get a group for a dungeon than doing a dungeon.
Yeah, that's a pretty normal experience.
Yeah, and
it's kind of weird because there sometimes used to be pros to that.
Yeah.
Or like in some of the older days of the game, it's like you're going to stick with that group because it takes a long ass time to form a group.
Yeah.
But I mean, forget I've not pugged Mythic Dungeons since Legion, so who knows? We need to get the guildies still into World of Warcraft for 9.1, or else it's going to be a tricky situation. I mean, I'd still just say never pug. Pugging sucks. Get a guild. Everything will be better in your WoW playing life.
Yep. And please, Blizzard, add more mechanics because I don't want to do the same dungeon. I want to do the same dungeon, but it's different.
Yes. Even, I'd love a situation where maybe you hit Mythic plus 10, every boss has a new mechanic.
That would be fantastic.
I'd be so much more like... I enjoy moving from a normal raid to a heroic raid because I get a new mechanic to deal with a bunch of the time, and the mechanics actually matter.
Yep.
And that's really fun. Whereas that, I do not get that from the dungeons, at least like conceptually. It's not exciting to me, and that's why I've not really engaged in it that much. And that's why, when I do jump into the Mythic Plus dungeons, it's going to be as a part of a formal challenge to myself.
Yep.
Rather than something I'm going to do because it's where I'm naturally pulled towards. Yep. I think. So, yeah, it was just interesting. This whole topic kind of exploded with the community.
It did.
I think a part of that was the titling and people kind of running with the titling and not checking out the full article from Wowhead. And part of it then is just I think a lot of players have been critical of Tyrannical for quite a long time, at least from what I have seen. I guess here I'm very clear to say seen, observed, not experienced. But from what I've seen, people have been critical of Tyrannical for ages. And I guess to a lot of them, they've seen their criticisms be met with a system that basically just says, well, you kind of have to do it now. And I think that's why a bunch of people are not that happy. They'd perhaps rather see Tyrannical be changed.
Yeah, just you don't like it? Well, you're doing it anyway. Sorry. Cheers.
Yeah, something
Cheers.
like that.
Here's another tender for another month. Thanks. thanks for the great content.
Yeah, tricky. I mean, there is the conspiracy side of where you can be like, oh, they've made it harder to get the achievement. Is this all a play for money? I don't necessarily think so. I think this is just the current balancing of this. And this is PTR, and it could all change. Yeah,
it's very much, I think it is a case of them barreling down the path of solving problems in the system until there's no, just not seeing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
Is basically what I think is happening here. Where they know that Tyrannical and Forward are two different things entirely that players have to deal with. So they have to codify that into their system. Because if they didn't do this, then no one would do Tyrannical. They would just do 15s on Fortified. So they solve that instead of solving Tyrannical.
But seemingly.
Yeah, mostly because that's the solution. You've got solution A, which is a solution that you can do, and solution B, which is a solution that is significantly better, but will also take you months and months you do not have, and resources you do not have. So their choices were let the problem be or solve the problem. They solved the problem, and it's probably worse for the experience as a result. But
yeah, Interesting. Dr. Terrible says streamers don't know the true plight of the LFG tool or pugging, or trying to find an active or grouping guild, Bellular, Asmongold, etc. They'll never know the hardships of pugging. Sorry to say. Honestly, like I know where you're coming from, but I totally fucking disagree. At least from my own experience, it's absolutely different for Asmongold because he just clicks his finger and a freaking team of people descend from the sky to support him. But I don't do any. Like, it's not like we have a guild of people who watch the channel. I mean, a few of them did, I guess, but that's just because a bunch of people watch the channel. If they're playing WoW, they happen to be in the guild. Like, the guild that I'm in is it's our editor, Nicky. His guild, he's been the GM of for ages. So, like, he joined the company, and then it was like, me and Matt didn't have a raiding guild. So we got an invite to that guild. So we are there with we're not playing like World of Warcraft Streamer Edition where you can instantly summon in, you know, bam, I have a full group. Bam, I have a... Not like that at all. I think we're... Versus most other people doing streaming and stuff, I think we're like way more close to the average player's experience. I guess versus streamers, that's the thing. We're not streamers. We're streaming right now, but you know, we're not gameplay streamers, and that does... There's
one example I want to bring in here, and it's... it was at the end of Legion. Preach did his series of playing a completely fresh, completely fresh account, not on the same Battle.net account, so didn't have anything, didn't have any friends, he was always offline. Every time anyone saw his character name, he would change the character's name because he didn't want anyone to know who he was. And I think he was playing a Warlock. He was playing a Warlock because I played a Warlock afterwards, and his entire thing was that I'm going to see what it's like. And I think he was actually properly, like, traumatized.
He looked... I remember seeing his face in those videos. Man had been through he'd been through it.
He's broken.
Did not look fun at all.
No, he's broken after that.
Yeah.
And I do... Like, I don't raid with pugs. Sometimes I do if I'm on, like, 2 a.m. or something. And that's just... It just takes so long. And there's just enough people that aren't good enough to be there. And then you've got a problem. Same with M+, but oh man.
Yeah.